The black maid took a blow intended for the Mafia boss's daughter, and every guest saw his fury ignite. Maya Carter had been working at the Valentino estate for over a year, enduring the quiet whispers and sideways glances from those who looked down on her simply because of the job she did. As a maid, she was invisible to most of the guests who walked through the grand halls, their eyes rarely meeting hers. But today, things were different. She had been asked to serve at a private event hosted by none other than Dominic Valentino himself, a powerful man, feared by many, and respected by all, including his guests. Maya was accustomed to the opulence of the estate, the polished floors, the grand chandeliers, and the smell of expensive perfume that lingered in the air. But today, there was a tension that she couldn't quite place. The room was full of important people, some of the wealthiest and most influential in the city, all gathered to celebrate the upcoming wedding of Dominic's daughter. Maya moved quietly, serving drinks, refilling glasses, making herself as invisible as possible, until the moment she stepped into the dining area. There, she saw it, the first sign of trouble. At the head of the table, Dominic's daughter, Elena Valentino, sat surrounded by her friends. But it wasn't the guests that caught Maya's attention. It was the way Elena was looking at her. Maya had never seen such disdain in anyone's eyes before. Elena's gaze burned with an almost palpable sense of superiority. As Maya leaned in to refill Elena's glass, the young woman sneered at her. "Don't spill anything this time," Elena said, her voice dripping with mockery. Maya didn't respond. She couldn't. She had learned long ago that silence was the safest way to avoid trouble. But today, something was different. The insult hung in the air, thick with the sting of injustice. She could feel every eye in the room on her as Elena's friends giggled behind their hands. And just as Maya turned to walk away, she felt it, a sudden, sharp shove from behind. The blow was meant for Elena. Someone had pushed Maya aside with such force that she stumbled forward, her hands reaching for anything to steady herself. But there was no time to recover. Every guest in the room had seen it, and every eye was now fixed on her. The room fell silent, the laughter dying instantly. But then, from across the room, Dominic Valentino stood up. His presence, commanding and powerful, immediately shifted the atmosphere. Maya could feel his gaze on her, sharp and unwavering. He had seen everything. And in that moment, Maya knew everything was about to change. Maya stood frozen, her heart racing in her chest. The room had gone quiet. The laughter, the chatter, everything had stopped. All eyes were on her. The force of the shove still echoed in her mind. But it was the silence that made her feel the weight of it all. She had always been invisible, a servant in the grand scheme of things. But today, she was seen. The question was, what would happen next? Her fingers tightened around the tray she was holding, her grip tightening as though it could somehow steady her nerves. She had never been the center of attention, and in that moment, she wished more than anything that she could vanish into the shadows, just as she had done countless times before. But that wasn't going to happen now. As she tried to regain her composure, she heard Dominic Valentino's deep voice cutting through the stillness. "Who did this?" His words were like a command, sharp and unwavering. Maya turned to look at him, her breath caught in her throat. He was standing at the head of the room, his broad shoulders casting a powerful presence that seemed to fill the entire space. His gaze was intense, his dark eyes locked on her, and for the first time since she had entered the room, she felt both exposed and protected under his scrutiny. The guests in the room looked nervous, unsure of how to react to the tension that had suddenly gripped the air. Maya felt the weight of every single gaze, but it was Dominic's that held her captive. His eyes softened, just slightly, as he took a step toward her, his movements deliberate and controlled. It was then that she realized something. He wasn't angry with her. He was angry for her. The realization sent a chill down her spine. Dominic Valentino, the man who controlled everything and everyone around him, was showing concern for her. "A mere maid." "Maya," he said, his voice low but commanding. "Are you all right?" The words caught her off guard, and she blinked, momentarily stunned. She had never heard him speak to her like this, never heard anyone speak to her with such genuine concern. "Yes, sir," she managed to reply, her voice barely above a whisper. But the words felt hollow, the weight of the moment pressing down on her chest. She wanted to say more, to explain that she was fine, But the truth was, she wasn't. She wasn't fine. Nothing about this moment felt fine. The injustice of it all, the humiliation, the sudden surge of attention, it was all too much. And yet, in the midst of it, there was Dominic. Still watching her, still waiting for her response. Maya swallowed hard, feeling the lump in her throat. The tension in the room was palpable, but Dominic's presence seemed to calm the storm inside her, even if only for a moment. He stepped closer to her, his hand reaching out in a gesture that seemed both protective and reassuring. "You are not to be treated this way," he said, his words firm. But there was something else in his voice, a note of protectiveness, of determination. Maya looked up at him, her mind racing. She had always known who he was, the Mafia boss, the powerful man who ran everything. But in that moment, he wasn't just the boss. He was a man who cared about what happened to her, a man who refused to let injustice go unpunished. And that was something she had never expected. "I will deal with this," he continued, his eyes now focused on the group of guests, his gaze icy and unwavering. "Everyone here will know that this behavior will not be tolerated." The guests shifted uncomfortably, some avoiding eye contact, others fidgeting in their seats. Maya could feel the shift in the room. The power had shifted from the mockers to the protector. Dominic's fury was palpable, and it was clear that he would stop at nothing to make sure Maya was respected. He turned his attention back to her. "Maya," he said again, his tone softer now, "you don't deserve this." His words cut through the air like a blade, sharp and precise. And for the first time, Maya felt her walls begin to crumble. She was more than just a maid to him. She was someone worth protecting. It was a feeling she had never known, a feeling she had never allowed herself to imagine. But now, standing in front of this powerful man, she realized that she wasn't invisible anymore. She wasn't just the help. She was a person, someone deserving of dignity and respect. And maybe, just maybe, she was worthy of standing tall. Dominic's hand gently touched her shoulder, a gesture of reassurance. "I've got this," he said, his voice calm, yet commanding. "Go ahead and take a break. You've earned it." Maya nodded, her breath still shaky, but there was a small spark of relief in her chest. She wasn't sure what would happen next, but she knew one thing for certain. Her life had just changed. Maya had never experienced anything like this before. The room was still, the tension thick in the air, and the gaze of every guest was fixed on Dominic. She stood there, trying to collect herself, her mind racing with thoughts she couldn't quite process. She had just been thrust into the spotlight in a way she never wanted, but somehow, Dominic's presence made it feel different. The fear, the anxiety, the weight of all those eyes, suddenly it didn't seem as important. Dominic had stood up for her, in front of everyone. And it was more than just a simple act of kindness. It was a declaration of power. It was a promise that she mattered, that her dignity mattered. She was still trying to grasp the significance of it all as she stood in the corner of the room, away from the crowd, with a glass of water in her hands. She could hear the murmurs from the guests, but it was Dominic's voice that cut through the noise, calm and controlled. "Take care of this," he said to one of his men. Maya's heart skipped a beat. There was no anger in his voice, no hint of vengeance, just a quiet command. His attention shifted back to her. "Maya, you did nothing wrong," he said, his eyes softening as he walked toward her. For a moment, Maya was frozen, unsure of how to react. She had never been the recipient of such direct care from someone like him. He wasn't just the Mafia boss who ruled with an iron fist. In that moment, he was human. She felt a strange sensation in her chest, a mix of relief and disbelief. Maya started, but the words caught in her throat. She didn't know what to say, didn't know how to express the gratitude she felt. She had been so accustomed to being invisible, to blending into the background, that being seen, really seen, was something she had never allowed herself to expect. Dominic placed a hand on her shoulder, a gesture that was more comforting than she ever could have imagined. "You've worked here for a long time, haven't you?" he asked, his voice gentle. Maya nodded slowly. "Yes, sir," she replied. "And you've been nothing but professional, haven't you?" He continued, his eyes searching hers. Again, she nodded. "I have," she said softly. Dominic gave her a small, reassuring smile. "Then don't let anyone tell you otherwise. You are not invisible, Maya." His words settled into her like a warm embrace, and for the first time, She realized that maybe he was right. Maybe she wasn't invisible anymore. Maybe, just maybe, she was worthy of more than the role she had always played. For so long, Maya had been convinced that her worth was tied to how little she mattered to others. She had grown accustomed to the idea that she was just a maid, just someone who cleaned, someone who could easily be ignored, dismissed, or even humiliated. But now, standing before Dominic, that belief was crumbling. He had shown her something she hadn't seen in herself: strength, dignity, and worth. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice trembling slightly. Dominic gave her a nod, his gaze steady. "You don't need to thank me. This is how it should always be," he said, his tone firm. He then turned toward the guests who had been watching, his eyes cold and unyielding. "You all heard me," he said, his voice rising slightly. "This kind of behavior won't be tolerated here. If anyone thinks they can treat someone like Maya like that again, they'll have to answer to me." The room fell silent, the air thick with tension, but there was no mistaking the authority in his words. Dominic had spoken, and it was clear no one would dare to cross him. Maya watched as the guests exchanged nervous glances, some even shifting uncomfortably in their seats. But none of them dared to challenge him. As Dominic turned back to her, he seemed to soften slightly. "Maya, I'm sorry you had to go through this," he said quietly. "But it won't happen again. I won't let it." Maya looked up at him, her heart swelling with emotion. She had always believed that people like Dominic, people with power, were untouchable, unreachable. But here he was, speaking to her with such sincerity, such raw emotion, that for the first time, she felt like she mattered. "Thank you," she said again, her voice steadier this time. Dominic gave her a brief, almost imperceptible smile before he turned and walked away, his presence still commanding the room. As he spoke to his guests, Maya found herself alone in the quiet aftermath of the moment. She stood there, still processing everything that had just happened. She had been humiliated, yes, but she had also been seen, heard, and protected. And that was something she had never allowed herself to believe could happen. For the first time in a long while, Maya felt something stir inside her: hope. Maya sat quietly in the break room, the hum of the refrigerator the only sound in the otherwise silent space. She still couldn't fully grasp everything that had happened earlier that evening. It had all unfolded so quickly: Dominic's sudden intervention, the way the guests had all but cowered at his words, the unexpected softness in his voice when he addressed her. She had always known Dominic as the feared Mafia boss, the one whose presence alone could silence a room. But tonight, for the first time, she had seen a different side of him, a side that had shown care for her, a mere maid, in a way that she could hardly comprehend. She couldn't stop thinking about how he had stood up for her, how he had treated her with respect. It felt surreal, like she had somehow stepped into a new reality. She had never allowed herself to imagine that someone like Dominic, with all his power, could see her, really see her, for who she was. But he had, and she couldn't deny that it made something stir inside her, something she had buried deep within herself for so long. Her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of footsteps. She looked up, and there he was, Dominic, standing in the doorway of the break room, his posture as commanding as ever, but this time, there was a slight change in his demeanor. His eyes were softer, almost as if he was unsure of how to proceed. For a brief moment, neither of them spoke. Maya felt a flutter in her chest, her nerves suddenly on edge. She had been trying to process everything, trying to make sense of how this powerful man had made her feel valued. But now that he was standing in front of her, the words she had rehearsed in her mind felt inadequate. "Maya," Dominic began, his voice low, but steady. "I wanted to make sure you're all right." The concern in his voice was genuine, and it caught her off guard. She had never expected such care from him, and now, it was almost overwhelming. She swallowed hard, trying to find her voice. I'm fine, sir," she replied, though she didn't fully believe the words herself. Dominic took a step forward, his eyes locking onto hers. "You don't have to call me sir," he said, his tone warm, but still carrying that commanding presence. "Just Dominic is fine." Maya nodded, the tension in her shoulders easing just a bit. It was strange, hearing him address her so casually, but it also made her feel more human, somehow. "I just wanted to apologize again," he continued, his gaze softening. "No one should have treated you the way they did. especially not in my home. Maya shook her head, not wanting to dwell on the past. It's all right, she said, though the memory still stung. It's not your fault. Dominic's expression hardened slightly, his jaw tightening in a way that made her realize how deeply the events had affected him as well. It is my fault, he said firmly. I should have made sure no one ever treated you like that in the first place. Maya opened her mouth to protest, but Dominic held up his hand, silencing her. I don't want you to think for a second that what happened tonight is acceptable. I'll make sure it doesn't happen again. Maya's heart fluttered in her chest. She hadn't expected such a direct promise, but it meant more to her than she could say. Thank you, she whispered, her voice barely audible. You don't have to thank me, he said, his tone softening. I just want you to know that you're respected here. You always have been. Maya looked down at her hands, unsure of how to respond. She had never been shown respect like this before, and it felt like a dream. She had spent so many years hiding behind her role, trying to be invisible, trying to avoid attention. But now, with Dominic's words, everything was different. I'll make sure you're treated with the respect you deserve, he added, his voice firm again. And if anyone ever dares to question your worth again, they'll answer to me. Maya looked up at him, her eyes wide with disbelief. For a moment, it felt like the weight of the world had been lifted from her shoulders. She didn't have to hide anymore. She didn't have to pretend. Dominic Valentino, the man who controlled everything around him, was offering her something no one else had ever given her: respect. And for the first time, Maya allowed herself to believe it. She wasn't invisible. She wasn't just a maid. She was someone who mattered. As Dominic turned to leave, he paused at the door, glancing back at her one last time. Take the rest of the night off, he said. You've earned it. Maya nodded, the words caught in her throat. She had no idea how to thank him, how to express the gratitude she felt. All she could do was watch as he walked away, his figure disappearing down the hallway. Outside was bustling as usual, but for Maya, it felt like a new day, a day filled with possibilities. She had no idea what the future held, but she knew one thing. She no longer had to live in the shadows. Her thoughts were interrupted by a knock at the door. Maya opened it to find one of the staff members standing there with a tray of breakfast. Dominic asked me to bring this to you, the staff member said with a smile. Maya nodded, taking the tray. She could feel the shift in the atmosphere. There was no longer any hesitation, no longer any uncertainty. She had earned this. She had earned respect. As she sat down to eat, her mind wandered back to the night before. Dominic's words still echoed in her head. You are not invisible. I hope you slept well. Maya smiled, the tension in her shoulders easing as she approached him. Good morning, she replied, her voice steadier than it had been in a long time. I did, thank you. Dominic set the newspaper down and gestured for her to sit. I wanted to thank you again, he said, his tone sincere. What happened last night? No one should ever be treated like that. I will make sure it never happens again. Maya nodded, her heart swelling with gratitude. Thank you, she said quietly. But it wasn't just you who made it different. It was you standing up for me that changed everything. Dominic smiled, a hint of pride in his eyes. You deserved it, he said simply. And you deserve so much more. Maya's heart much, she said quietly, her voice filled with emotion. I don't know how to thank you. Dominic smiled gently. You don't have to thank me. Just know that I believe in you. And I'll be here to help you every step of the way. Maya felt a warmth in her chest, a sense of hope she had never known before. She wasn't just a maid anymore. She was Maya Carter, someone who could stand tall, someone who could dream beyond the walls of this estate. And with Dominic's support, maybe, just maybe, those dreams could come true. Maya woke up the next morning feeling different. The weight that had always hung over her, the quiet burden of being invisible, had lifted. It wasn't just the events of last night, though they played a part. It was something deeper, something that had shifted inside her, a quiet understanding that she no longer had to hide. She walked to the small window in her room, looking out at the sprawling estate. The sun was rising, casting a soft golden hue over the manicured gardens. It felt like the start of something new, something she had never allowed herself to imagine before. As she made her way downstairs to begin her day, she noticed the change in the atmosphere at the estate. It wasn't just her. There was something different in the air, something lighter. The staff, who had always been polite but distant, now greeted her with smiles, nodding their heads in acknowledgement. It was as if they too could sense the shift. Maya couldn't help but wonder if it had something to do with the way Dominic had stood up for her, the way he had treated her with respect. She had always known he was powerful, that he commanded attention wherever he went, but it was the way he had treated her in the midst of everything that left a lasting impression. He had shown her that she was more than just a servant. She was a person who deserved respect, and that feeling, that acknowledgement, had changed her. As she entered the kitchen, Maya saw Dominic sitting at the table, reviewing some papers. He looked up when she walked in, his dark eyes locking onto hers. For a brief moment, their gazes met, and Maya felt a warmth spread through her chest. He had done more for her than she could ever explain. "Good morning, Maya," he said, his voice smooth and steady. "I trust you slept well." Maya smiled, the tension in her shoulders easing. "Good morning, sir," she replied, her voice more confident than it had been in weeks. "I did, thank you." Dominic set the papers down, his expression softening. "I'm glad to hear that." He paused for a moment, his gaze never leaving hers. "I've been thinking about what you said last night. About wanting more for yourself." Maya blinked, surprised by the sudden shift in the conversation. She had almost forgotten that moment, when she had dared to admit to Dominic that she wanted more than just the life she had been living. She had been too afraid to even think about it before. But last night, his words had given her the courage to speak up. "I don't know how to explain it," she began, her voice hesitant. "I've always just tried to survive. I've never really thought about what I want for myself." Dominic leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. "Sometimes survival is enough," he said, his voice low. "But it's not the same as living." Maya looked down at the table, processing his words. She had spent so many years just getting by, just trying to make it through each day. She had never considered what it would be like to truly live, to have dreams and aspirations beyond the walls of this estate. "I don't want to just survive anymore," she said quietly, more to herself than to him. "I want to live." Dominic's eyes softened, and he nodded slowly. "Then it's time for you to start. You're capable of so much more than you realize, Maya, and I want to help you get there." Maya's heart skipped a beat. She had never imagined hearing those words from anyone, let alone Dominic Valentino. The man who had everything, who had the power to control so much, was offering to help her. She felt like she was standing on the edge of something big, something that could change her life forever. How do I start?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Dominic smiled, a small, reassuring smile. "First, you need to believe in yourself. You've already taken the first step by acknowledging that you want more. That's the hardest part." Maya nodded, her mind racing with possibilities. For the first time, she felt like she had a future that was no longer defined by her past, by the life she had been forced to live. She could see a new path opening up in front of her, one that didn't end in the shadows of the estate, but in the light. "You've been invaluable here," Dominic continued, his tone serious. "But I want you to know that there's more waiting for you. You don't have to stay in this role forever." Maya's eyes widened. She had never considered leaving the estate, never thought she could be anything other than a maid, a servant. But Dominic's words made her question everything she had believed about herself. Could she really leave? Could she build a new life for herself? "I'll help you find a way," he said, as if reading her thoughts. "But it has to start with you. What do you want, Maya?" Maya took a deep breath, her heart pounding in her chest. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to dream. "I want to help others," she said, the words flowing out before she could stop them. "I want to make a difference, to do something that matters." Dominic's eyes brightened, and he nodded. "That's a good start," he said. "I'll help you get there. But first, you need to believe in yourself. Believe that you're worth more than what you've been given." Maya nodded slowly, feeling a sense of resolve settle in her chest. She wasn't sure what the future held, but for the first time, she felt like it was within her reach. And with Dominic's support, she knew that she could make it. Maya spent the next few days in a quiet whirlwind of thoughts, trying to process everything Dominic had said. He had given her a glimpse into a future she never thought possible. The idea of leaving the estate, of doing something more than what she had been for years, it was overwhelming. But the more she thought about it, the more she realized it was exactly what she needed. She couldn't stay in the shadows forever. She had to take the first step. She had to believe in herself. That morning, she woke up earlier than usual, the quiet calm of the estate before the rest of the household stirred, allowing her time to think. She stood, in front of the mirror in her room, taking a long look at herself. It was the first time in a long while that she really saw herself, not as a maid, but as someone capable of more. She had always hidden behind the role she played, never allowing herself to dream of anything else. But now, standing in her own room, she could see the person she could become. For the first time, she allowed herself to imagine it. After a long pause, Maya finally made her decision. She walked out of her room, her footsteps steady, her mind set. She knew what she had to do. As she entered the kitchen, she saw Dominic sitting at the table, just as he had been the other day. He looked up at her with a knowing expression, as if he had been waiting for this moment. "Good morning, Maya." He greeted her with a slight smile. "Good morning," she replied, her voice filled with newfound confidence. "Can we talk?" She didn't need to ask twice. Dominic set aside the papers he had been reading and looked at her, his attention fully on her. "Of course. What's on your mind?" Maya took a deep breath, steadying herself. "I've been thinking about what you said," she began, her hands gripping the edge of the table. "About leaving, about doing something more. I want to do that. I want to take the next step. But I need help." Dominic's expression softened, and he nodded slowly. "I knew you would," he said, his voice calm and assuring. "You're not alone in this. I'll help you in any way I can." Maya felt a wave of relief wash over her. It was one thing to say it, but another to have someone, especially Dominic, offer their support. It felt like a door had opened in front of her, one she had never dared to walk through. But now, with Dominic's words, she was ready to step through it. "I don't know what I'm doing yet," she admitted, her voice trembling slightly. "But I know I can't keep doing what I've been doing. I want to make a real difference." Dominic leaned forward, his eyes never leaving hers. "That's a good place to start," he said. "The world needs people who care, people who want to make it better. You can do that, Maya. I've always known. You had it in you." The words stirred something inside her, something powerful. She hadn't realized how much she had longed to hear that kind of encouragement, how much she had needed to hear that she could be more than what she had been. "Thank you," she whispered. "I don't know how to repay you for all you've done." Dominic gave her a reassuring smile. "You don't have to repay me. Just promise me you'll keep moving forward. Promise me you won't let fear hold you back anymore." Maya nodded, her heart swelling with gratitude. She didn't know exactly what her future held, but she knew it was within her reach. For the first time, she believed in the possibility of something more. Dominic's support was all she needed to take that first step. As she left the kitchen, Maya felt lighter. There was a new purpose in her steps, a new fire in her heart. She was no longer the maid who blended into the background. She was someone with a future, someone who could make a difference. And with that thought, she walked into the new chapter of her life, ready to face whatever came next. Maya stood at the edge of the garden, looking out at the vast estate before her. The world seemed different now, like everything had shifted just enough to let her see it from a new perspective. The wind stirred her hair as she took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the past few weeks lifting from her shoulders. She had made a decision, and now it was time to act on it. Dominic's words had stayed with her, lingering in her mind like a constant reminder that she was capable of so much more than she had ever believed. It wasn't just about leaving the estate. It wasn't just about finding a new path. It was about finding herself, about embracing the person she had always been but had never allowed herself to see. That morning, she had made the decision to start taking steps toward her new future. It wasn't going to be easy, and there were moments when doubt would creep in, but for the first time, Maya felt like she had the strength to face whatever came next. As she walked back toward the main house, her heart raced with excitement and anticipation. It felt like the beginning of something important, something life-changing. She knew it wouldn't be an easy road. There would be challenges, obstacles, and moments when she would question herself. But she also knew that for the first time, she was taking control of her life. And that meant everything. When she entered the house, she was greeted by a few of the staff who smiled at her warmly, nodding their heads in acknowledgement. It was a small thing, but it made her feel like she was part of something bigger than herself. She was no longer just a maid in the background, invisible to the world. She was someone who mattered. Maya made her way to the kitchen, where she found Dominic sitting at the table, as he always did. He looked up as she entered, his eyes immediately locking onto hers. There was something in his gaze, something that said he understood. "Good morning, Maya," he said, his voice steady but filled with warmth. Good morning, she replied, her voice steady and confident. She felt the change in herself, and she was ready to share it with him. I've been thinking about everything we talked about, she began. About what you said, about not just surviving, but living. Dominic nodded, his expression encouraging. I'm glad to hear that, he said. What have you decided? Maya took a deep breath, gathering her thoughts. I want to take the next step. I want to leave the estate. I want to do something with my life that matters. I want to help people. I don't know exactly what that looks like yet, but I know I have to try. Dominic smiled, a small but genuine smile. I'm proud of you, Maya, he said, his voice filled with sincerity. I always knew you had it in you. And I'll help you, every step of the way. Maya felt a surge of gratitude. She had spent so many years doubting herself, thinking she wasn't capable of achieving anything beyond her current role. But now, with Dominic's support, she felt a sense of hope she had never experienced before. Thank you, she said softly, her voice filled with emotion. You've given me the courage to believe in myself. Dominic stood up from the table and walked over to her, placing a hand gently on her shoulder. You've always had that courage, Maya. You just needed to see it for yourself. Maya looked up at him, her heart swelling with appreciation. I don't know how to thank you enough, she whispered. Dominic's expression softened, and he gave her a reassuring smile. You don't need to thank me, he said. Just promise me you'll keep moving forward. You've taken the first step. The rest will come. Maya nodded, feeling the weight of his words settle deep inside her. She wasn't sure what the future held, but for the first time, she was willing to find out. As she left the kitchen, her mind was filled with possibilities. There was so much to learn, so much to do, but she was ready. She wasn't going to let fear hold her back anymore. She was going to live, really live, and make the most of every opportunity that came her way. The road ahead would be challenging, but Maya was no longer afraid. She had the support of Dominic, and more importantly, she had herself. Maya woke up earlier than usual the next morning. The soft rays of the morning sun filtered through her window, casting a warm glow across the small room. She stretched slowly, feeling the tension in her body begin to fade. The past few weeks had been a whirlwind, filled with unexpected revelations, moments of fear, and, more than anything, the overwhelming feeling of change. She had made a decision, and now she had to see it through. It wasn't just about leaving the estate anymore. It was about becoming the person she had always wanted to be, but never thought she could. Her thoughts were interrupted by a soft knock on the door. Maya quickly got up and opened it, only to be greeted by a staff member with a tray of breakfast. Dominic asked me to bring this to you, the staff member said with a polite smile. Maya's heart warmed at the gesture. It was a small thing, but it meant so much. Thank you, Maya replied, taking the tray. She carried it to her small table by the window and sat down to eat, her mind racing with thoughts of what came next. As she ate, she couldn't help but think about Dominic and everything he had done for her. It wasn't just the support he had given her, it was the way he had made her feel. For the first time in her life, she didn't feel invisible. She didn't feel like just a maid, a servant in the background. She was someone who mattered. She was someone who had a future. After breakfast, Maya quickly got ready for the day ahead. She had never been one to dwell on the past, but now, she found herself reflecting on everything that had led her to this moment. She had spent years working in silence, trying to stay out of the way, hoping that no one would notice her. But now, with Dominic's encouragement, she had come to realize that she had always been worthy of being noticed. And now, she was going to step into the world, ready to make her mark. She walked down the hall of the estate, her steps confident, her heart light. The staff members she passed greeted her with smiles and nods, and for the first time, she didn't feel the need to shrink back. She didn't feel like an outsider anymore. She was part of this world, not just a bystander. As she reached the kitchen, she found Dominic sitting at the table, just as she had seen him before. He was reading through a stack of papers, but when he saw her approach, he set them aside and smiled. Good morning, Maya, he said, his voice steady and warm. Good morning, she replied, walking over to him. She could feel her pulse quicken, but it wasn't from fear. It was from anticipation, from the excitement of what was to come. I've been thinking, she began, her voice steady but filled with emotion. About what we talked about before. About the future. Dominic looked at her, his gaze intense but encouraging. What have you decided? He asked. Maya took a deep breath, her heart racing. I'm ready, she said. I'm ready to leave the estate and start my new life. I want to help people, to make a difference. I don't know exactly what it will look like, but I know I have to try. Dominic nodded, his expression serious but filled with approval. I'm proud of you, Maya, he said. You're not just leaving the estate. You're stepping into something much bigger, something that will allow you to truly live. Maya felt a surge of gratitude at his words. He had always been there for her, even when she hadn't fully understood what that meant. Thank you, she whispered. I don't know how I could have done this without your support. Dominic smiled, a small but genuine smile. You had it in you all along, Maya. I just helped you see it. Maya felt a tear threaten to fall, but she blinked it away. She wasn't going to cry. Not now, not when she was finally making the change she had always wanted. I'm ready, she said again, this time with more conviction. I know you are, Dominic replied. He stood up, walking over to her and placing a hand on her shoulder. You've already taken the hardest step. Now, it's just about moving forward. And I'll be here to support you, every step of the way. Maya nodded, feeling the weight of his words settle into her heart. She wasn't sure what the future held, but for the first time, she was ready to face it. She wasn't afraid anymore. She wasn't going to hide in the shadows. She was going to live, truly live, and make the most of every opportunity that came her way. As she left the kitchen, Maya couldn't help but smile. She felt lighter, freer than she had in years. The estate was no longer her world. She was about to step into a much larger one that was filled with possibilities. And as she walked out the door, she realized that for the first time, she truly felt like she belonged. Maya stood in front of the mirror, taking a deep breath. The weight of her decision settled on her shoulders, but instead of feeling overwhelmed, she felt something different: excitement, hope, and a bit of fear. Fear that was natural, she told herself, but not enough to hold her back. Today was the day she would step out into the world and start living the life she had always dreamed of, the life that had been a distant fantasy until now. She had talked to Dominic the day before, and his words still echoed in her mind. He had given her the freedom to choose her path, and he had promised his support. He had told her that she didn't have to face the future alone. That alone was enough to give her the courage she needed. She had packed a small bag the night before, just the essentials, clothes, toiletries, and a few personal items. She didn't need much. Her future was no longer defined by the walls of the estate. As she walked down the stairs, she could hear the sounds of the staff moving about, preparing for another day of work. But this time, it was different. She wasn't a part of that routine anymore. She wasn't just a maid, blending into the background. She was Maya Carter, a woman who was finally ready to take control of her own destiny. She walked into the kitchen, where she found Dominic sitting at the table, as usual. He looked up at her, his eyes immediately catching hers. There was something different in his gaze, something softer, warmer, as if he knew what she was about to do. Good morning, Maya, he said, his voice steady but with a hint of understanding. Good morning, she replied, her heart racing in her chest. She could feel the moment between them, the unspoken words, the shared understanding of what this meant. Are you ready? Dominic asked, his gaze never leaving hers. Maya took a deep breath, trying to steady her nerves. I think so, she said, her voice more confident than she had ever felt before. I'm ready to start my life. Dominic stood up from the table, his movements slow and deliberate, as if he was giving her space to breathe, to take it all in. He walked toward her, placing a hand on her shoulder in a gesture of reassurance. You've already taken the hardest step, Maya, he said softly. The rest is just about moving forward, one step at a time. Maya nodded, her throat tight with emotion. She didn't know what the future held, but she knew one thing. She was no longer afraid. She wasn't going to let fear hold her back anymore. She wasn't going to let doubt control her. Thank you, she whispered, for everything. Dominic's smile was warm, reassuring. You don't need to thank me. You did this on your own. I'm just here to support you. Maya's heart swelled with gratitude. She didn't know how to express what she was feeling. All she could do was smile back at him, the man who had given her the chance to believe in herself. As she turned to leave, Dominic stopped her with one last question. What will you do first? He asked, his voice low. Maya thought for a moment, the possibilities swirling in her mind. I don't know yet, she admitted, but I know I want to make a difference. I want to help people. I've always wanted to do that, but I never knew how. Dominic nodded, his expression thoughtful. That's a good place to start, he said. Just remember, you don't have to have it all figured out. Just take it one step at a time. Maya smiled, feeling a new sense of peace wash over her. She didn't need all the answers right now. She just needed to take the first step. As she walked out the door of the estate, she felt the cool breeze against her skin. The world outside felt vast, full of possibilities, but for the first time, she felt ready to face it. She wasn't sure where her journey would take her, but she was certain of one thing. She was finally living. With each step she took, Maya felt lighter, more free, more herself than she had ever been. The past was behind her, and the future was ahead. And for the first time in her life, she was ready to embrace it. Maya stepped onto the bustling streets of the city, the bright morning sun casting long shadows over the sidewalks. The world outside the estate felt different, more alive, more unpredictable. It was as if she had been stepping in place for so long, and now, with each footstep, she was moving forward, towards something that was hers to create. She took a deep breath, feeling the cool air fill her lungs. There were no more walls to hide behind, no more hiding in the shadows, waiting for permission to exist. This was her moment. As she walked, her mind began to wander. The estate, the people there, Dominic. Everything had been a part of her journey, but it no longer defined her. She was Maya Carter, a woman who had the freedom to choose her own path. She wasn't bound by her past, by her role, or by anyone else's expectations. She was the one who would decide what her future would look like. She passed by familiar storefronts, the busy rhythm of the city's life moving around her. The sounds of cars honking, the chatter of pedestrians, the scent of fresh coffee wafting through the air. It was all so new, yet somehow comforting. She had spent so long in the background, so long, believing she was just a maid, just someone to be overlooked. Landing on Maya, she recognized him instantly. It was Gabriel, Dominic's younger brother. He looked different outside of the estate, less formal, more relaxed. He made his way to her table, his expression unreadable but calm. "Maya," he said, his voice smooth. "I wasn't expecting to see you here." Maya looked up at him, surprised by his presence. "I'm just having some coffee," she replied, her voice steady but cautious. "Is everything all right at the estate?" Gabriel nodded, pulling out a chair and sitting across from her. "Everything's fine," he said. "Dominic wanted to make sure you were adjusting okay." Maya wasn't sure how to respond. She had been ready to leave, to step out on her own, but hearing Dominic's name brought a wave of emotion she hadn't expected. "I'm doing all right," she said finally. "It's just a lot to take in, you know?" Gabriel studied her for a moment, his eyes sharp but thoughtful. "I understand," he said quietly, "but I want you to know that Dominic truly believes in you. He's been talking about you a lot lately. He's proud of you." Maya felt a lump rise in her throat. She hadn't expected to hear that, especially from Gabriel, who had always been more distant than Dominic. "Thank you," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Gabriel nodded and then stood up. "Take care of yourself, Maya. And don't be afraid to reach out if you need anything. Dominic wants you to succeed." Maya watched as he left the cafe, a quiet sense of reassurance settling over her. It was strange, but hearing Gabriel's words made her feel like she was on the right path. She wasn't alone. She had Dominic's support, even if he wasn't there physically. As the day wore on, Maya walked through the city, taking in everything around her. The world seemed different now. It wasn't just a place she had to survive in. It was a place where she could thrive. She wasn't sure what her next step would be, but she knew she was ready to take it. She had her own future to build now, and for the first time, she wasn't afraid to face it. Maya spent the next few weeks exploring the city, learning how to navigate its busy streets, and settling into a new rhythm that didn't revolve around the estate. It felt freeing, like she had finally shed an old skin. Each day brought something new. New people, new experiences, and new challenges. She still had moments of uncertainty, but they didn't weigh her down the way they once did. She had Dominic's encouragement in the back of her mind, and that kept her going when doubt crept in. One afternoon, Maya found herself walking through a neighborhood she hadn't visited before. It was quieter here, the streets lined with small shops and cafes. She noticed a little bookstore on the corner, its windows invitingly warm with the glow of soft lighting. She had always loved books, but in the rush of her past life, she had never taken the time to indulge in something so simple. Today, however, She had time. She stepped inside, the bell above the door jingling softly. The smell of old paper and coffee greeted her as she walked in. The bookstore was small, cozy, and filled with the kind of quiet energy that made Maya feel like she could breathe easier. She wandered between the shelves, running her fingers along the spines of the books, lost in the comfort of it all. After a few minutes, a woman behind the counter greeted her with a smile. "Can I help you find anything?" she asked. Maya paused for a moment before shaking her head. "No, I'm just browsing. I haven't been in a bookstore in a long time." The woman's smile widened. "Well, you're in the right place. Take your time. There's no rush." Maya nodded and continued to browse. She felt drawn to a particular shelf near the back, filled with books on personal growth and self-improvement. She picked one up, its title catching her eye, The Power of Now. She had heard about books like this, books that encouraged self-reflection and change, but she had never given them much thought. Now, though, it felt like the perfect time. She skimmed through the pages, and something about the words resonated with her. She had spent so much of her life living in the past, waiting for something outside herself to change. But now, she understood that change had to start from within. She didn't need permission from anyone. She didn't need anyone to define her. She was the one who could shape her future. Maya took the book to the counter and purchased it, her heart light with a sense of purpose. She walked back outside, the weight of the book in her bag grounding her, reminding her that she was in control of her own journey. She didn't know exactly where it would take her, but she was no longer afraid to find out. Over the following days, Maya continued to immerse herself in the world outside the estate. She took small jobs here and there, earning just enough to get by, but it was enough. She was building a life that was her own, one step at a time. She took long walks in the evenings, reflecting on everything she had learned so far. The uncertainty still lingered, but it was no longer paralyzing. Instead, it was a part of the process. She had learned to embrace it. As she sat in a park one evening, reading The Power of Now, she felt a shift in herself. She had always thought that happiness and success were things she had to achieve, things that came with time and effort. But now, she understood that they were not destinations. They were ways of being. She could be happy now. She could be successful now, simply by choosing to embrace who she was and what she wanted. It was liberating. A few days later, Maya received a call that would change everything. It was a number she didn't recognize, but when she answered, she was greeted by a familiar voice. "Maya, it's Dominic." She sat up straight, surprised by the sudden call. "Dominic, hi. How are you?" she asked, her voice filled with curiosity. "I'm doing well. I've been keeping an eye on your progress," he said, his voice steady and warm. "And I wanted to tell you that I'm proud of you. I've seen the changes you've made, and I think you're ready for the next step." Maya's heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice tinged with both excitement and uncertainty. "I know you've been figuring things out on your own, and I respect that," Dominic continued. "But I think it's time for you to take a bigger leap. I want to offer you a job, Maya. A real opportunity, not just cleaning rooms, but something that will help you grow and use your talents. I think you could be a great asset to my team." Maya was taken aback. She hadn't expected this, not in a million years. "What kind of job?" she asked, her mind racing. "It's not just a position," Dominic said. "It's a chance for you to develop, to learn more, and to make a real impact. I've seen your potential, Maya, and I think it's time for you to see it too." Maya was silent for a moment, processing what he had said. She had come so far, and now, this opportunity, this chance, was right in front of her. "I don't know what to say," she whispered. "Say yes," Dominic said with a smile in his voice. "You've already taken the first step. Now it's time to take the next." Maya felt a surge of gratitude and excitement. She had come so far from the woman she used to be, and now, with Dominic's offer, she could see the path ahead clearer than ever before. This was it. This was the opportunity she had been waiting for, and for the first time, she was ready to take it. Maya sat in the small office, the soft hum of the city beyond the window a distant reminder that life outside was still moving. She had been here for a few weeks now, and every day felt like another step forward. The job that Dominic had offered her was not what she had expected, but it was exactly what she needed. It wasn't glamorous, and it wasn't easy, but it was a chance to prove to herself that she could do more than just survive. She had always thought that if she worked hard enough, things would change. But now, she understood that the work wasn't just about labor, it was about growth. She wasn't just building a career, she was building herself. The transition hadn't been easy. There had been moments of doubt, moments when she had questioned whether she was really ready for this. But every time that fear crept in, she remembered the words Dominic had spoken to her. You've already taken the first step. Now it's time to take the next. And with those words, she kept moving forward. As she sat at her desk, she thought back to the days she had spent on the estate. The loneliness, the feeling of being invisible, of being confined by expectations that were never her own. She had spent so many years hiding behind the role of a maid, thinking that was all she could be. But now, she was doing more than that. She was learning, she was growing, and she was finding her voice. The door to her office opened, and she looked up to see Gabriel standing there, his usual expression a mixture of curiosity and caution. Maya, he said, stepping inside. How's everything going? Maya smiled, feeling the warmth of his genuine concern. It's going well, she replied. There's a lot to learn, but I'm getting the hang of it. Gabriel nodded, his eyes softening. I knew you would. You've always had potential. Sometimes, it just takes a little while for people to see it. Maya couldn't help but feel a surge of gratitude. Gabriel had always been a bit distant, but in that moment, she could see the sincerity in his eyes. Thank you, she said quietly. Gabriel's expression shifted, and he stepped closer to the desk. I just wanted to make sure you knew that Dominic is really proud of you, he said, his voice low. He's been talking about you a lot lately. I've never seen him so invested in someone before. Maya blinked, surprised by the unexpected admission. I didn't know, she said softly. Gabriel smiled, but there was something more in his gaze, something almost protective. He's not the type to show it, but he believes in you, to adjust to her new life. She worked harder than she ever had, but she felt a sense of fulfillment she had never known before. There were challenges, of course. There were days when she felt like she wasn't making enough progress, when the weight of the world seemed a little too heavy. But each time that doubt surfaced, she reminded herself of how far she had come. She was no longer the woman who felt invisible, the one who hid in the background. She was Maya Carter, and she was becoming someone she could be proud of. One afternoon, as Maya was wrapping up a meeting with a colleague, Dominic walked into her office. He had a look on his face that was both serious and thoughtful. Maya, he said, his voice steady. I've been thinking about the work you've been doing here. You've exceeded my expectations. Maya looked up, surprised by his words. Thank you, she said, a smile tugging at her lips. I've been doing my best. Dominic nodded. I can see that, and I think it's time for you to take on more responsibility. Maya's heart skipped a beat. What do you mean? She asked, her voice unsure. Dominic's gaze softened, but there was a fire in his eyes. I want you to take on a leadership role, he said. You've earned it, Maya. I believe you have the skills to lead a team and make a real difference in this company. Maya's mind raced as she processed what he was saying. A leadership role? She had never even considered the possibility, but now that it was in front of her, she couldn't deny the excitement that surged through her. I don't know what to say, she whispered. You don't need to say anything, Dominic replied. Just know that I believe in you. I've seen you grow, and I think you're ready for this. Maya stood up slowly, the weight of his words settling in her chest. This was it. This was the next step. She wasn't just part of the team anymore. She was going to help lead it. She felt a sense of pride, of accomplishment, that she had never known before. She had worked hard for this moment, and now it was hers. Thank you, she said, her voice steady. I won't let you down. Dominic smiled, a genuine, approving smile. I know. You won't. As he left her office, Maya stood there for a moment, taking it all in. She had come so far, and now, she was exactly where she needed to be. This was just the beginning.